I think Sino-U.S. relations are a really complicated one, and we are now being the two largest economy. We have a more responsibility. Maybe I mean, the two countries should concentrate on solving their domestic issues, rather than put the nationalism on, populism on each other, blame each other, and China become a scapegoat sometime. So what do you think? How we can work on that?
I agree with you, but in all honesty, Henry, I found you a bit selective in the way you framed the issue. You emphasized ways in which the United States might scapegoat or demonize China. And I think I recognized that there were those risks. But I think it would be helpful for you and my Chinese friends to recognize that there have also been occasions on which China has engaged in attempts to subvert democratic countries in their homelands, not in China, in which China has used ostensibly private companies as tools of statecraft to pursue security objectives. There have been rhetoric from China. Many in China, including people at very senior levels, have engaged in wolf warrior diplomacy. And it's a little bit hard for us to look past that. So I am happy to join you in the belief that populist nationalism is a toxin that both of our countries need to work hard to contain. But I'm not prepared to accept your statement or your implication that somehow this is an American problem without being a Chinese problem.
I think we need to really look at both domestic situation, but from trade point of view, we still haven't seen the trade lifting. The sanction imposed by President Trump is still on, and now 1 year after President Biden in the office, this tariff is still on, and recently we see 140 congressmen, asking to get more baby exceptions for the tariff that apply to the American companies, so that they can expand the scope of exempt those tariffs. So what do you think about that?
Henry, you follow things very closely. China made a variety of promises with respect to its level of purchases. Have those commitments been met? They have not been met. So I think when we think about the tariffs, and I'm someone who believes that we need to engage in economic diplomacy and find a new and much more sensible framework than the one that was negotiated several years ago. But I'm not going to sit here and let you suggest somehow that the United States is doing wrong by maintaining the tariffs without acknowledging that China has completely failed to keep the agreement. Now, I don't think that agreement is a very sensible agreement in the current context. And so I'd like to see something new negotiated. But in all honesty, I don't think it's reasonable for you to suggest that the United States should simply unilaterally remove the tariffs without China making any change in a variety of its businesses that are subjects of complaint. But I am going to insist that if we're serious about trying to find solutions together and trying to find a basis for cooperation, that I won't allow any sense that somehow the United States has been the one that's broken the agreements or broken the rules or done the wrong thing, and China is an aggrieved innocent. I'm not going to allow that idea to stand. And I think I would say to my Chinese friends that when I visited China for the first time as a tourist in 1979, China was a very poor country. When I visited China in 1991 as the chief economist of the World Bank, China was a developing but still poor country. When I had the great privilege of meeting for 5 hours with Premier Zhu Ranji at a very delicate moment in the discussions with respect to China's joining the WTO in 1999, China was an emerging market that could rely on the rest of the world to understand its special problems. I think China needs to recognize that now, with an economy that has grown sixfold since the year 2000, that the situation is very different. And China can't just be asking for what others do, but it needs to be responsive to the needs of others.
I understand maybe during the pandemic, the phase one wasn't really a satisfactory one, but it's actually, they still made all the historical high on that. So they're trying.
Yes, a historical high, but no, not agreement with what was committed.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
So I understand that the world has changed and that when those commitments were made, nobody understood the pandemic. But I think we have to enter into the conversation from the perspective of compromise and win-win, not from the perspective of vilification.
What do you see the student exchanges between China and the US? Now, China has actually, even though we have a lot of dispute and differences, China is now the largest student sending country to the United States. We have 400,000 students currently studying in the US, and actually the US embassy, the chief, Chancellor of Affairs, he told me that just in 3 months of last year, June, July, August, the US embassy has issued 85,000 visas for the Chinese students to go to the United States. So you see China, of course, still sees U.S. university as a magnetic for the talent attracting. Also recently, the government has relaxed also visas for the student to stay. But what do you see the exchanges as talent student exchanges for the both countries? But we also see, for example, the MIT professor Gang Chen being charged by FBI and now recently discharged by the court. So this kind of China initiative that made this atmosphere really tight. It's not good for the scientific community, professor, academic exchanges, even for think tank. So how do you see these continually people-to-people exchange, especially among the young people and student and academic exchanges, and also this kind of China initiative really not helping from what we can see here?
During my time as president of Harvard, I worked very hard to promote more exchange between the United States and China. I was very eager to see us welcome more Chinese students, both as undergraduate students at Harvard, as visiting students at Harvard, and for more Chinese citizens to come to our graduate schools. I tried to lay the foundation that has moved forward over time towards more distance education from Harvard, so that people could benefit from the Harvard experience even when they couldn't come. And I tried to open Harvard offices and encourage as many students as possible to study study in China. I have each year before COVID made a visit to Beijing for the purpose of speaking to the Schwarzman Scholars Program, because I have thought that that kind of exchange is enormously valuable in promoting understanding between the United States and China. I have welcomed postdocs from China and pre-docs from China to work in my research group. I have a very fine one who has graduated from Beijing University this year. So I'm a huge believer in these positive exchanges. But there do have to be some ground rules. And there have been excesses on our side that I think took the form of racial prejudice, really, and I think that's deplorable. But I think there also have been activities of Confucius Institutes. There have also been activities in which students functioned as spies in ways that were quite problematic. So I very much want to see much more interaction and exchange. But I think we do need to have some common understandings that surround that kind of exchange. And yes, there have been problematic things that have happened in the United States. You mentioned one with respect to the MIT professor, but in the United States, in Australia, in other countries, there have also been things that were done that were problematic by Chinese visitors. And so I think we need, in a spirit of cooperation, to make this work, because ultimately both countries are going to do better if there's more exchange.
Really, thank you so much, Dr. Summers. And my staff was mentioning to me, we had 150,000 people from our network watching this online. And of course, we have differences, and we need to have a more dialogue. I mean, that.
Henry, my thank you for a very constructive, generous, and sharp yet warm dialogue that we've been able to have. And I very much enjoyed it and learned from it, and will very much want to keep engaged with the CCG as we go forward. Almost always, communication is better than non-communication. And I hope that the extent of communication between our two countries can be increased. I think that one crucial aspect of successful diplomacy is what might be called strategic empathy. And too often in discussions between the United States and China, Americans make their points about what's wrong in China, and China makes their points about what's wrong in America. And nobody really tries to think about how a more constructive relationship can develop. And my hope would be that that can be a greater focus going forward.
You put a very keyword, strategic empathy. We really need to understand each other, communicate, dialogue, and that's also the spirit for CCG. We want to be a platform of dialogue, and we hope that we can have a better understanding, so we can avoid misunderstanding as much as we can. So Professor Larry Summers, thank you again for your late evening and for your speaking to us. We really appreciate it. We hope to see you again. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.